Hey everybody, welcome back to Number One Leading Ladies. This is a podcast by women for women where we focus on working with each other instead of tearing each other down, or building each other up instead of tearing each other down. Today we have a special guest who's actually in an accelerator program that I was in a few months ago, Tanya Mayo, and I'm going to have her introduce herself and talk a little bit about her journey.
Hi, everyone. My name is Tanya Mayo. Thank you so much, Kaylee, for having me. Kaylee and I were in the cohort together, and actually we were paired up as buddies. And that was fun because the way that we motivated each other was we had little tiny wagers, like if you don't get it done, you owe me a Jamba Juice. So that's a fun little tidbit about Kaylee. In case you don't know, she will do anything for
Food.
The competition, for the win. As Kaylee's mentioned, my name is Tanya. I have a small boutique consulting firm that my business partner and I have been running for the last, 12 years now. And we do a lot of consulting work, specifically with education and around equity, social justice. And so we've worked in all different sectors in trying to bring more equitable and just practices into workplaces, organizations, I'm excited to be here.
Thank you, Tanya, so much for being on today. Thank you for introducing yourself. So we won't be on here for very long. There's really just a couple of key questions that I ask, and if we end up going down a different path, that's also okay too. This is just kind of a conversation so everyone can get to know you. Number one, leading ladies, we usually like to talk about and this is actually going to be perfect, I think, for our conversation, the path of getting to some traction. So, for example, when you get started, if it was, me and we're talking about getting started by, putting everything on a credit card, or if you're living with your parents, or, if someone in your family had to support you, and then getting to that point of what it really took to start and then get to actually seeing some traction, what did that process look like for you and what did it take?
Yeah, that's great. I think many of us, right? Like I took lemons and I made lemonade. And why I say that is that I had been laid off. I had a really good, stable job. I was working for the San Francisco Department of Children, Youth, and Families, and I was the director of training and capacity building. And this was about 12 years ago, and there was an economic downturn. I got laid off, and so I went on unemployment for the first time in my life. Luckily, working for the city, you continue to have health benefits. So I was in a pretty stable position, but definitely not financially where I wanted to be, and and didn't feel sort of like productive. And I had a good friend who had just started doing consulting, and she said, let's do this together. Let's go in on it as a team. And she said, we may not make any money in the beginning, but let's see if we can get some traction. And so what I had was the opportunity, because I was receiving unemployment, to not feel like the whole rug had been ripped out from under me, and I could actually take a risk. And that's just what we did. And I had met a woman by the name of Marsha Ardress, actually, who was working for a foundation at the time. And she was really looking for some folks to start doing some more work around character education. And initially, like, the conversation was, so what does character education actually mean when we're talking about Black and brown kids in the inner city? And for us, it really means like building character from the inside out and from the ground up, rather than sort of these character values being imposed on young people and them having to live up to some standard that maybe isn't in alignment. And so she took a risk on us. She said, I'm going to invest $50,000, and most of that money went towards the programming, but it gave us an opportunity to build some traction. And, in the beginning, and this is what I would say to other young entrepreneurs, and especially women entrepreneurs, is that, I think there were two things that we did early on. One was we always gave them 10 and charged them 5. And so in the beginning, we always said, give them a little bit more or a lot more than they're expecting, because we're building up our reputation and we're building up our brand and our identity. And knowing that also what we're doing is we're having an opportunity to build frameworks and to build training series that we'll be able to replicate multiple times over. And we'll still be able to charge clients down the line the same price, but we'll have less work to do as we move forward. And so I think that was kind of the number one sort of strategy that I think helped take us really far. And then I would say number two what we did was we took our investments and we took the initial profits and we went and we printed up curriculum. So rather than creating like a toolkit or a binder, we actually invested and got it printed and paid for photography or artwork, and then we purchased 1,000 copies. And so instead of just purchasing 200 for the client that we needed, we took all our profits and we purchased 1,000. And so with those extra 800 copies, it took us to a level of professionalism that we wouldn't have otherwise had, because we were able to then package not only our trainings and our consulting work, but also say, hey, and we have a whole series of curriculum that we can sell you to your staff so that they can actually take the activities and the concepts and the frameworks and bring them to life. So that was a lot. That was long-winded, but I think that was sort of the things that got us to some traction early on.
Yeah, it sounds like reinvesting in yourself, really. I mean, and knowing something that works. So maybe at some point you had done it on a very small scale yourself with somebody, or have seen the need somehow. Usually there's some kind of research, so you knew the need was there, instead of just guessing, and then said, okay, well, now that we have, an order, like you said, so some traction, let's go ahead and just take our profits and reinvest. And I think that's something right now that it makes me nervous. I was watching an interview with Elon Musk last night where he got into a point in time where he did that 100%. He took all of the income that he made from his first big success with PayPal and basically was going to invest a third of it, and then did that. And the other two businesses were they needed some more capital infusion, but then you see where he is now, right? Question for probably 3, 4, 5 years. Was that worth it? I agree with you. That's what I'm doing now. And it's hard. It's freaking hard, but
it's hard.
If you believe in what you're doing.
You have to be willing to fail too. I mean, I love listening to Brene Brown because she really talks about, like the number one unifying thing with anyone who has achieved success and happiness is failure, and the willingness to fail, and knowing that taking risks means that sometimes we're going to have some failures, but those are where we learn, and those are where we get to also have opportunities for big gains.
Yeah. Yes, I second that. So one of the other questions we like to ask, especially since you have so many years with your specific company and you've gotten to traction, it's a little bit of a different interview than I'm used to, which is cool. So looking, just as a general question, I guess I'll ask it that way. What would you say has been your biggest lesson?
God, there's been a few. There's this great series called Fuck Up Nights. I don't know if you've ever heard of them. They're all over the country, and we were at a shared workspace where one of the women there hosted Fuck Up Night Oakland, and so she invited us to be on it. And so it was an opportunity. And Fuck Up Nights, essentially, you have 7 minutes and 7 slides to basically talk about a fuck up. And I had gone and seen a couple, and when I went, I thought, wow, we're so lucky. Like, we haven't had any fuck ups in the 8 or 9 years that we've been in business. And then after going to a couple of fuck up nights, I was like, wow, we've had so many fuck ups. Aren't we lucky? But I would say that probably the thing that stands out the most, that's maybe kind of a universal theme, is that on one hand, I think it's been really beneficial, the level of risk-taking and the willingness to kind of iterate and move and change quickly. And so I don't want to dismiss that as being a positive, but I will say that there have been many times when I think it would have behooved my business partner and I to pause a little bit more. And so I really want to say that this is advice for those who have a tendency to sort of move quickly and be willing to always sort of like change the script. Because if you're not that type of person, then I actually would encourage you to lean into that a little bit more. But I think for her and I, we just kind of thrived off of change and newness and wanting something different. And I think there's some times where it would have benefited us to listen to some of our colleagues and our coworkers and friends who said, maybe you want to slow it down a minute or kind of rethink this or do a little bit more research. I think there's been a handful of times where we've kind of leaped and sometimes it's worked out really well. And sometimes we've lost, $200,000 as a result of it. But I think that if we had slowed some things down and thought it through, there would be a couple of instances. And the one I'm thinking of in particular is we made this decision to shift our whole model to holacracy, which was something that my business partner had read about and we both got kind of geeked out on. And we did it literally in like a 2-week turnaround. Like we're going to, take everybody's salary up, make them all managers, change our whole kind of structure. And I think it was too fast. And I think it had negative impacts on us financially, but I think it also impacted our, the employees who went through that process and weren't ready to move as quickly as we were.
Yeah. So kind of sometimes slowing it down a little bit. Is that?
Yep. Slowing it down, thinking it through, talking to a few more people.
Yeah. Sometimes you don't know what you don't know, but yeah, it's actually, I think it's pretty cool that you can mobilize change that fast in the first place, because usually with organizations, especially big ones, you can't even get that done just because the size, of things, the decision-making levels that have to be, combed through, I guess. I think that's a pretty good lesson to share with individuals, because usually, like I mentioned, most of the entrepreneurs or the ladies that I've had on the show so far, they have talked a little bit more about the ramp-up period and lessons that you're learning as far as like who we didn't hire in the first place, or things that we didn't think through as far, so it's really cool from your perspective to see, looking back what your advice is too. It's different, which is great, because I'm looking in a different lens, and now being able to, think from a different time frame is great. The other question that we ask our guests on the show is what has been your biggest win?
I mean, I know this is going to sound ironic, perhaps, or maybe you've had some other folks that are talking about this, but I think that actually, like what happened as a result of the pandemic and the ability that we had to be able to pivot, and we took a pretty dramatic pivot. We were up until the pandemic, 100% of our work was done in person. And we were doing experiential kind of hands-on trainings with lots of like posters and PowerPoints and, sort of interactive stations where people and activities where people would get materials and have to figure out a puzzle that would then become sort of a parallel to what was happening in the workplace that would allow for kind of a somatic feeling to be unleashed. And so we had built an entire model of learning that was really based on kind of this in-person connectivity. And that was, and it's still hugely important, and I miss it. And it's something that, post-pandemic, I want to get back to some of that. But I think the realization that we were going to have to do something dramatically different during the pandemic. And so shifting 100% of our work, at least for now, to online, and figuring out how to do that virtually and how to bring that same sense of connection and community and sort of in the moment learning to life through a virtual platform. It's something that we had always thought about doing as an extension of our business, but because it took a lot to do, we never sort of had the kick in the ass that the pandemic gave us. And so what happened as a result is that it created a national reach to our work that we never had before. Because in the past it was 90% local. On occasion, we'd hop on a plane, begrudgingly, having to pack, leave our family, et cetera, et cetera. And now, the ability to like have a training where people from Australia or from, Kenya or New York, or even to be able to expand our staffing pool, to be able to hire trainers and other, support staff throughout the entire country has been a huge win for us. And so I would say that, we have kind of risen out of the fire of the pandemic, and we're probably doing better now. I think we'll close 2021 in a stronger position than we ever have in 10 years.
I mean, that's awesome. Seriously, that's a really big win, I think, business-wise, for sure. What's interesting is from some other advice that I've gotten before from somebody who was not afraid to scale. They scaled too fast. And I hear about that a lot, actually. where, for example, what they wanted to do was get a sample of, positive interactions with clients and a couple of clients, say here in Dallas, for example, and say, okay, well, there's proof of concept there. So now we're going to go open an office in Minneapolis and New York and, California. And so then they, long story short, it became very disorganized. And if you really look at the profit that they were making, growing like that, they were actually making more money in a quicker basis and had more retention staying local. Well, you already had that. You already had that basis of, that locality and knowing exactly probably what it was going to take. Then once, this opportunity came, it was just like, okay, well, I'll just do the same thing, but sit in front of a screen and do it over here instead of, in person. And maybe it's a little bit different, but, no,
I think
great.
What you're saying is spot on, because there were many times as we would come to the end of a fiscal year and we were starting to think about our global budget for the following year. And I remember multiple times saying, you know what? Let's not make a goal to raise more money next year. And, usually we were always making some sort of incremental increase from year to year. But to actually make the decision not to do it and we would kind of brainstorm the ways in which we could potentially do it and then realize like the cost benefit to it didn't seem worth the amount of extra energy and time and coordination and human power that it was going to take. And then also just sort of saying, like, what do we love to do? Yeah. Like, what part of this do we love to do? If we love to expand and expand and expand, go for it. But if what you love to do is like work with the clients or make that sale that, gets all your investors excited about, then make that Dallas sale. Don't try to run off and, make sales and, across the country that has you sort of burning the midnight oil,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's again, just some really great, I think, wise advice, looking back. And like I said, I've heard both ends, but I hear all the time people scale too fast, but it's like, well, when is that right point, So, Tanya, that's really great advice. And a lot of the things that you shared today, I think are going to be of value, especially, getting going. A lot of people or women that are listening to the show or people in general, are in that stage of, okay, what do I do? I'm getting started. But then you gave like kind of the back end perspective too. So this was a really good session. Thank you so much for being on our podcast. And how can anyone that's listening or reading this episode or session right now, how can they reach out to you or get a hold of you if they're curious about either what you do or how you've done what you've done?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think if you're interested in just what we're doing and, what we're offering to the world at large, go to our website, which is bethechangeconsulting.com. And if you want to just reach out to me personally, I love supporting women and humans and people who are growing. So I'm happy to, answer an email or jump on a quick phone call. And so start by emailing me at Tanya, that's TANYA, at bethechangeconsulting.com. Just spell it the way it sounds, bethechangeconsulting.com. And that's after a famous quote, be the change you wish to see in the world. By God.
Love it. Well, Tanya, thank you so much for being on today. And I'll see you really soon. Everybody, again, thank you for tuning in. You know me. This has been #1 Leading Ladies podcast. And we look forward to seeing y'all next week on the show.